Hey everybody, I am here with Mike Fisher from Codify, who does heat maps for basically everybody in the world. All the great pitchers, he's responsible for all their greatness, right?
Rounding up to the nearest 100%, sure.
Yeah. And I am here with Tom House, legendary pitching coach, worked with some of the greatest pitchers of all time, and just a sarcastic monster on social media as well.
Well, it's nice to be here, guys. It's fun to see old age and treachery hanging out with youth and exuberance. So maybe between the three of us, we can actually solve something that's going on today before we're done.
Awesome. But we're here to give a preview of the World Series, mostly focusing on the pitching aspects, but we can go off into any direction that these guys want to. So what are you guys looking forward to in the World Series? What have been your takeaways so far in the playoffs? And what are you looking forward to in the World Series? Pretty broad question, and we'll dial it back.
Well, obviously the Houston pitching is insane. I mean, and it's not like some people are like, well, the Yankees suck. And so, they made the Astros pitching look better. It's like, come on, go back to August. They have a 2.5 ERA as a team since August 1st. And you watch the games and you think about how they assemble from the first out to the 27th out, God willing. And you just watch how they do it. And it's like, they just don't let up. I'm not saying Astros sweep. I'm just saying coming into it, I'm looking at that and like, okay, there's the bar and it's high. And it doesn't mean they're infallible, but boy, oh boy, out of the gate. That's rough.
In my experience, pitching usually trumps hitting. It's harder to hit than it is to pitch. And if you go through that Houston pitching staff, every one of their pitchers has a command pitch and an out pitch, every one of them. And they throw strikes, they're aggressive. They match up well, and you never see the same arm slot or the same stuff from any one pitcher more than 2 times through the lineup. And then you back that up with good defense and timely hitting, what I would call mistake hitting. If I looked at both these teams, the Phillies have some pretty good pitching also. They have guys without pitches and command pitches. But I don't think they're as experienced. And I think their hitters could be pitched to better than the Astro hitters can.
That's an interesting point. Like I was breaking down, I knew Houston had great pitching, but I did a breakdown for Fox Sports on their pitching staff. And as I got done, I was like, oh my God, there's no weakness here. And as a matter of fact, I have a tough time figuring out who I would leave off this pitching staff for the postseason because they are so good. And they have waves. I think Hunter Brown is going to be just an outstanding young pitcher, and he's just scratching the surface. So there is just that pitching staff is as deep as I've seen.
Well, and Michael, you might back me up in this. Sandy Koufax told me way, way back when that there's good curveball hitters, but nobody hits a good curveball. And I think both these staffs are re-emphasizing the curveball to complement change and fast. I think the major leagues are adapting to 100-mile-an-hour fastball. And because of that, there's more of a reliance. And if I'm overstepping my bounds here, Michael, let me know. But there's been initially, if you threw 100 plus, you could get through any lineup. Well, over the last year to year and a half, I'm seeing the big league hitters are all adapting to 100-mile-an-hour fastball. So that puts it in a greater reliance on a second and third pitch. And while both these staffs have pitchers with second and third pitches, I think the Astros command the zone better as a pitching staff than the Phillies do.
Right. I'll agree with that, but I'll add, the thing that doesn't get talked about, I don't think as much as it should, is the effect of adrenaline, playoff adrenaline. You go look at it's easy to see the velocity and the spin rate increases just through the roof with some of these guys, maybe not the vets, but most of them. But what comes with that, with especially throwing a curveball where you want it to go, and when you're afraid to hang one, it's interesting to watch that, where you're like, a curveball would be good here, but you also don't have any clue where this guy's going to throw it. He believes that too, and he's wondering about that whole effect of hanging one. And I don't think we're seeing as many curveballs as we should. It's your point, but you are starting to see a swing that way. But it's interesting in the playoffs to see, like, Valdez has a great curveball. But even now, you watch him in the playoffs, he doesn't like throwing it to lefties, and it's in his head. But all of the Codify stuff is like, holy cow. I mean, this guy should be throwing this more, a lot more.
I agree 100%. But who's the closer for the Astros? Is it Presley?
And he's got one of the highest spin
and
rate
he doesn't mind throwing 7 curveballs in a row.
No, he's used to throwing 3,300 RPM garbage, and
so in that respect, I think the Astro pitching staff they have more confidence in their second and third pitch overall than the Phillies do.
You make a good point, though, because if you look at curveballs, I think Wheeler's curveball is starting to play up, and he seems to be using, at least to my eyes, using it more effectively and maybe more. And Aaron Nola's got legit one of the best curveballs in baseball and has for years. So the Phillies' top 2 to me matches up with anybody. As a matter of fact, like, if you compare the Astros' top 2 with the Phillies' top 2, both in the bullpen as well as in the starting rotation, I think that's comparable, right?
As far as stuff is concerned, yes, I agree 100%. But I don't know what Michael would call it. I call it funk. If you look at the 2 starters for the Phillies, they are pure. Their mechanics are Greg Maddux like. They're pristine. And if you go to the Astros, they have guys that look like train wrecks throwing, but they still can throw strikes. So sometimes that frenetic delivery, the different delivery, plays a little bit better in tight situations than the pristine delivery that's predictable. And what I'm seeing, when you're wild in the strike zone, both these teams can crush a ball. So, and maybe you can help me out here, Michael. I don't know if they have what I used to call effectively wild, like a Randy Johnson. He could dot up a slider and a fastball on the black away and then throw one behind your head. That has a little bit more intimidation at home plate to a hitter than someone that is around the zone. And I think that's why Bryce Harper went off on the Padres, because all the Padre pitchers were, if they were wild, they were wild in the zone. That young Venezuelan pitcher, first year in the big leagues, he's 31. He was not wild at all. So all their best hitters, all the Phillies' best hitters, could dive in sitting on a pitch and not be afraid to get, scorched with something that was too wild. So there's a comfort zone with a pitching staff, and I don't think the Astro pitchers can be comfortable with any of them.
Well, every hitter can defend some area of the zone. It might be, if it's me, the size of this little thing that I'm holding. But if it's Harper, and right now it might be 2/3 of the zone. And I think, to your point, I think it fits what you're saying, is he can defend a large part of the zone right now, regardless of the pitch. I think you see it with Bregman. You can't throw a curveball to Alex Bregman in the zone. You can't do it, or you're going to ask for another baseball. Sliders as well to Bregman, even fastballs. It's like Bregman can defend a large part of the zone. So, and they have the damn plate discipline to not swing at those ones that are 3 or 4 inches outside. So
that's what's totally impressing me right now, is the discipline that most hitters that on both teams, they spin on what I used to call a bitch pitch, 2 inches off the plate down and away, they just spin on it. And if you've got an umpire that is playing a conservative strike zone, that doesn't speak well for the pitcher. So we'll see, but I think it's a good matchup. I think the fans in both cities are appreciative. It's kind of becoming ho-hum in Houston. I'm kind of partial to Dusty. Dusty and I were roommates in the minor leagues with the Braves, and he's still a really good friend of mine. So you talk about, having two teams that you'd like both of them, but one of them you like better. So I'll go on record right now, because Dusty's my buddy, I'm kind of pulling for the Astros.
I got to give the stat back to Harper real quick, that in the last 35 plate appearances, Bryce Harper has walked 0 times.
Yeah, I saw that. That came
And
across Twitter. I think you pointed that out. And for
Right.
for a free swinger like he is,
Right.
so you're right. He's clicked. He is definitely in the zone. Can you guys define the zone? Have I ever thrown this at you? I think we've talked a little bit. The zone is when thinking is inversely proportionate to the stimulus of the environment. And I think Bryce he's not thinking too much. He's just doing. And what was the announcer? That was the at bat of a lifetime.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what it was. And it couldn't happen to a better kid.
Well, all right. So when a guy is in a zone like that, what do you do pitching wise to him? Like, how do you get him out of it? Yeah, I was asked that question too, and that was my instinct. But
you're exactly
somebody
right. What you just said, put him on. Look at the numbers. What Barry Bonds, how many times he was walked? I think somebody walked him with the bases loaded. I want to say Buck did. So, and even in my generation, the scouting reports would say, "Don't let this guy beat you." And when that guy came up, we would. I think they call it pitching around. They don't automatically walk him, but you made sure that nothing was reachable.
But is somebody like a Verlander or a Framber or even, McCullers with his array of off-speed stuff, is he going to be intimidated by pitching to Harper, or do you think that he's going to go at it? Like, I think you can trust Verlander if he's got a place to attack Harper.
Can I tell you a little story that might take about a minute and a half?
Sure.
Okay, so we're all aware how many no-hitters that Nolan Ryan threw. And people don't realize that he had 12 one-hitters that he went into at least the 8th inning with. There was a left-handed hitter, I want to say Bergman, that Nolan in pregame when we were setting everything up, he would tell Pudge Rodriguez, "Do not let me shake to a curveball off this guy." And if you look it up, Bergman broke up 2 of Nolan Ryan's no-hitters in the 9th inning because Nolan changed his mind and threw him curveballs. So it isn't so much that you're sitting in a pitch, you're looking for a pitch, you don't want to throw a pitch. It's when they're both in the zone, when you have a hitter like Nolan facing a pitcher like Nolan facing a hitter like Bryce Harper, it's who changes their mind inappropriately first that ends up second on the deal. So even the superstar pitchers, when they're in the zone, have the same issues that superstar hitters do. But I think hitters have the tougher task.
Because even if you guess right, it doesn't mean you're going to crush it.
Exactly. If you guess right, you're still going to fail 7 out of 10 times in a long sample.
What pitchers do you think have a good shot against Harper on the Astros staff? Like, who do you think has the best stuff to go at him?
I think any of their left-handers that can spot their fastball and throw a curveball right behind it. I think you have to off. If I was, even with my stuff, if I was facing Bryce Harper where I couldn't pitch around him, I would pitch him hard in, make him pull it, and go as soft as I could away and not leave it over the white part of the plate. I'd live on the black and cross my fingers.
Your
Valdez has his curveball map is the bluest map of any pitcher against any Harper hitter, but he doesn't like to throw it to lefties. So here we are.
Then that's when I call it the Kenny Rogers syndrome. I said, "Kenny, I'm going to call a pitch and you can't shake me, but I might only do it 2 or 3 times a game, but I'm going to take that decision out of your hands. And I'm going to ask you to commit to throwing it, even if you don't feel good, because it's legit." So I don't know if the calling the pitch comes from up top on the bench or anything else in between, but there'll come a time when that must throw curveball has to be thrown, even with Valdez, who doesn't like to.
Now, right? I mean, he this year, I can't remember, he's thrown at 10 or 11, 12% against lefties, but I mean, against Harper, I mean, a third of his pitches should be curveballs.
Yeah, I would not throw a fastball that Harper could reach, at least in his state of mind right now.
Yeah, he's a guy, Valdez, outer half with fastballs is fine, but to your point, you miss, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So how important do you think? So to me, again, I think the biggest difference, at least when I'm looking at it, is the depth of the pitching staffs, both in the starting rotation and the bullpen, as opposed to the very cream of the crop on both sides. I think, I don't know that there's many pitchers pitching better than Seranthony and Alvarado for Philadelphia in the bullpen. Like, those guys have been absolutely lights out for a little bit now.
Right.
And what I like about them is they're both kind of effectively wild. Which one is the left-hander?
Alvarado,
Alvarado.
Yeah. Because he can sizzle on the block for 2 or 3, and then he'll throw one to the screen. So yeah. I think that's a positive thing. But in a close game, say it's getting into 7th, 8th, and 9th inning.
Yeah.
I think the experience of the Astros and the depth of the staff of the Astros is going to carry the day. That would just be if I was a betting man, that's what I would bet.
Right. It's easy for me to think about this in 2 ways. When you talk about the start in the back, the start of the rotation. I mean, Nola and Wheeler, I adore. I won't equate them to the top of the Astros or rotation, but not that far. It's not like you look at one and say that they're deficient to them. I mean,
right.
1, 2 on both sides are great, and the back end are really solid. So I think about the middle of the pitching staff. Who's your third starter? What are you going to do in the 4th game? Are you bringing that guy back? You probably are, but you might not be. But then I also think about a game. And it's interesting when you look at a game and how both teams have scored and allowed runs throughout the season. Here's a stat for you, okay? Now, the average big league team scored less than 700 runs this season, okay? Under 700. The Astros scored 110 runs in the 5th inning, okay?
Wow.
That's a lot in the 5th inning. Now, think about that for a minute.
Yeah,
why are you scoring more in the 5th inning?
Right at the turnover.
The Phillies allowed 100 in the 5th inning, okay? It sounds like one of those stats that get mocked about the full moon on Tuesday. No. Think about this. The Astros are really, really strong at scoring in the middle, and the Phillies are very deficient at allowing runs in the middle of that game. Watch that middle, and it really accentuates what we're talking about is you're strong in the front, you're strong in the back. What's happening in that transition?
Yeah. And Michael, you and I have talked about this. I break 9 innings into three inning games.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the team that comes out of the first 3 innings ahead usually carries through the middle 3. If they're tied coming out of the first 3, then that middle 3 is when your non-star pitchers get kind of exposed.
Right.
And I think, and it probably came from you, the Astros are like 55-1 when they have a 2-run lead in the 7th inning or something. It was some stupid stat. And that to me is going to be the difference maker. The middle innings with the Phillies and closing with a lead with the Astros are going to be where I think it's going to show up.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was looking at it too, because I think, again, anything could happen in the first 2 games. Anything can happen in the 9th. I think 8th and 9th, you have pretty even. But when you get to the middle of the game and you get to the middle of the series is where the difference is, because the Astros 3 and 4 are ridiculously good.
Right.
Like,
right.
I mean, as good as anybody in baseball, and probably as good as most teams 1s and 2s. And that's where the Phillies kind of have a little bit of a hole. Although, Ranger can pitch, but I don't feel as strong about him as I do about McCullers and
Mm-hmm.
Christian Javier. I mean, it's those guys are tough. And the same thing in the middle of the game, because the Astros have so many arms and the Phillies don't. I think moving Eflin to the bullpen was a good move, probably to steal some outs there. And they do have some other guys who can throw, but not to the level of the Astros.
I agree. Now, Rob, you brought it up. What is weather? do you either one of you feel that weather in Philly will allow the Phillies to perform more efficiently than the Astros, who are always playing in good weather? In other words, how much is bad weather going to affect what the Astros do?
Well, I mean, Verlander grew up in cold weather, right? And pitched in cold weather for a long time. I think he should probably have a
He
good
should
idea.
handle it okay.
Yeah, he should have a
But
pretty good idea what he's doing. But there probably is a little bit of that. And the
yeah,
variableness, like if you're talking, again, we're just playing it out, going who on paper looks better, but anything could happen in this. If Harper stays hot, Schwarber is hot, and Nola and Wheeler beat the Astros 1s and 2s, you're now talking about a series where it could go either way, right? So it's not like just because having the depth and just because having this advantage on paper really matters when the rubber meets the road. It does more times than it doesn't, but anything could happen. The weather is a variable.
yeah. So we'll see, but I think it's going to be an interesting series. I'm not sure whether overall people probably wanted to see two like Dodgers, Yankees. So Phillies, Astros might be considered middle America, but I think for even a baseball purist, it's going to be a great series.
Yeah, I think I thought the Astros had the most solid team in the American League, maybe in baseball. The thing that worried about me, the Dodgers, was their back end of the bullpen. I didn't think was all that. And I also think some of their pitching, at least at the very highest.
Toward the end of the season, their pitching was a mess.
What do you think about the Astros hitters and the way and Philly pitchers attacking them? Who's the toughest guy in the Astros lineup for Phillies pitchers to attack?
Well, I think the scariest guy is the big left-handed hitting first baseman. But I think probably the one you have to be most careful with right now is Bergman, because he does not have a weakness in the strike zone, and he's proven to be a flatliner. He doesn't get excited when the base is loaded, whatever the situation is. So those two, I would try not to let them beat me, the two of them. But the well-kept secret, and nobody really realizes, is that Tucker, the right fielder, he can sneak in. He is, I think statistically, Michael, you probably know it, but I think he's probably the most consistent hitter in the lineup.
He's so good, and the way he just goes about it, he rubs his hand on the dirt, and he's not really emotional. Even in the field, when he makes a good play, runs over and gets it. I don't want to say too many good things about the Astros for some folks to swallow, but he is so underrated. He is so good.
I agree.
Bregman, to your point, especially I think about in Houston with the Crawford boxes, and I know the Yankees fans want to say those are lucky home runs, but go look at how many balls he's hit over there and how he changes his game when the fence is that close. Think about those boxes when Harper comes up and they pitch him outside, by the way, because if you go look at some fly outs that he had in other stadiums, those are landing in those boxes. So not predicting it, I'm just saying that's in play.
It's going to be fun. So nobody's mentioned Altuve yet. Leadoff hitters are important in the equation. And what was he, 0 for 24 or 25?
I don't know what he was doing in that Mariner game. He swung at every pitch.
He
almost.
did swing at every pitch.
What was the number I posted? Like 14 out of zone pitches, something like that.
Yeah, but what's going to happen? He's going to go into this World Series, and Altuve has proven he'll lose the feeling and then find it. And can you imagine if he's hot, Bergman stays hot, and the big left-handed hitter is hot, with Tucker kind of sliding around like a cobra in the back, ready to snap? It's going to be a tough lineup to get out.
You can't count on a lot of runs if you're Philly, right?
Exactly.
Right. So,
yeah, one of the things I got asked at one point was, did the Dodgers have the best 1, 2, 3 hitters in baseball? And I was hesitant to say that because the Astros are pretty darn tough at their top of the lineup as well, productivity wise. Anyway, I think that's something to watch. top hitters of the Astros against that Phillies line, and the Phillies pitching, and then the ability to wear them down. Like, as we were saying, if you can start wearing them down, I know the Astros, they really have a pack mentality, their hitters do, as far as picking up tells, tipping pitches. Bregman is a expert at picking that stuff up. It's more than just the, that whole scandal stuff, whatever. They treat this as almost like a game, more so than other teams. Like, Bregman cracks pitchers better than almost anybody. And I just wonder
it's an art form. They boil it down to an art form. And another thing, it's which pitching staff has to throw the most pitches. I don't think either team, they don't make outs early in the count unless they have to go after, like they did with Darvish. You don't want to Darvish doesn't want to get it. If he gets ahead of you, he's going to figure out a way to get you out. So they went after him early, and they may have done that. The Phillies may have done that through the last two games, but I don't know if you can do that with the Astros. The staff that has to throw the most pitches is going to be the one that loses.
Who do you see as an X factor in this? Like, somebody that maybe we're not thinking of, that if they rise to the occasion is going to sway the series one way or another.
Well, the Phillies showed that against the Padres with is it the shortstop that hit the home runs? I mean, he was like booed, whatever. And then all of a sudden he hits back-to-back home runs. What was his name? Been the longest Philly on the active roster. What was Rhys? No, not Rhys. Say it again.
You talking about Hoskins?
Yes. So he was a surprise. Okay. Is there going to be someone like that showing up? Don't know. Maybe they peaked early with surprises.
I just like to see what we were already talked about, but what do Suarez and Falter, if he pitches, or Syndergaard, or whoever the hell they pitch, when they're waiting for Wheeler to get ready to pitch again, what is going to happen there? Because I mean, it can go off the rails right away, and you can't give up 4 runs in the first to the Astros. No. You can't do it. So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if you call that an X factor. That's my big question mark factor. Do the Phillies have enough good fortune at this point to stay in those games? What are you going to do when you don't have Wheeler or Nola out there?
Yeah.
So it puts extra pressure on them maybe in the first 2 games when they're playing against, 2 stud pitchers from the Astros at their stadium, to have to win one of those. Because if you don't, you're way behind if you don't win one of those 2 and you're relying on your 3-4 against the Astros, 3-4s, that's trouble.
Yeah, it's a handful. Who's got the best defense? Astros or Phillies?
Astros, definitely.
Yeah, that's not.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I think we decided who's going to win the World Series.
We did, except for the randomness of it, and as you mentioned, which is a really good point, weather could factor into it. If if the Phillies are lucky and they can buy a day with weather and maybe get somebody recovered quicker and not have to go as deep into the rotation, that could be a game changer. Or giving your bullpen extra rest if you have like a Wheeler going really deep into a game, so that you don't have to show your bullpen and maybe you keep them fresh. That could be a difference. There's so many little parts that I think, while on paper we can all agree it's the Astros are just the better team, and arguably, I think at this point, maybe even not arguably, they just are the best team in baseball. But anything could happen. It's baseball, right? Like, you can lose a game to anybody.
Like Yogi said, it ain't over till it's over.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
There's no clock on it, and there's no saying. I think I saw a statistic the other day that in the history of the World Series, it's only been won by superstars like 12 times. The rest of the wins were always done by a role player or a bench guy or a Bucky Dent type that, gets the right hit at the right time to win a World Series. So the randomness, there I said it, of baseball will show up. And even though we're sitting here figuring out statistically the Astros are going to win.
No. I don't want to say never, all that stuff, but I'll never say anything like that. I'm stunned
Exactly.
I was stunned at Dave Roberts guaranteeing a World Series
Yeah.
victory. It's like, I
You
watched
gotta
it.
yeah, gotta
What's
be
that?
careful. You gotta
No,
be
you should.
careful about those kind of statements.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. No, Dusty wouldn't say that.
No, but Dusty's been around the block long enough, and he was around
Well,
Henry Aaron, who when Henry would, I tried to sit on the bench and listen to what was going on before I went out to the bullpen. And I heard Henry Aaron 20 times come in and say, damn, if he hung that pitch. If he would have thrown a good slider, I would have taken him deep. So those are the kind of things. How do you explain the randomness? A hung slider with most hitters is a home run. With Henry Aaron, it was an out. So how do you explain that statistically? That I'm going to throw a backup slider to get this guy out because he's not looking for it.
look at that home run. What's his name? Chas McCormick hits off the top of the wall,
Yes.
and figure out how much differently, right? To hit that
Yes.
ball and have it not go out, or
Yeah.
a gust of wind, or a spin of the ball, or whatever. Come on. It's hard to appreciate when you're watching, but to ever think that any of this doesn't have
Do you
this
think the
humongous
average-
random factor.
Do you think the average fan understands the randomness of
No.
baseball and why it's probably the most predictable sport that's out there?
No names, but the announcers do not help with that. They
Yeah.
that something happens, and then they talk about how that's how they should have approached this to get that outcome. It's like, no, say it ahead of time and let's see what happens. And the ones that do, you see how, I know he's going to throw a fastball here, the guy bounces a changeup or whatever. It's like, you don't. It's hard for them to help, and it's hard to get there. And postseason probably isn't the place to have the classroom. But unfortunately, so many people are watching nothing but postseason that you hope that, again, no names, don't want to shame anybody or whatever, but some guys are making it seem like it's a lot more of a video game push button thing, where it's like, no, it's chaos, man.
Yeah.
It's chaos.
I feel that way. I think sometimes fantasy baseball kind of got us into that, where you're thinking of players as numbers and you put the best player here and and you're forgetting about a whole bunch of randomness that takes place, a whole bunch of team camaraderie, all other stuff to allow people to fail in certain situations, and then keep them up so that they come through in other situations. I think you lose that sometimes when you're looking at the game just through a numbers lens, and you think these things are much more sure than they're not. Same thing with hanging a curveball. Sometimes hanging a curveball, if the guy's throwing hard, it acts as a changeup, and you may be out front. It may be that you were looking for a curveball and you didn't get the curveball, a good curveball that you were looking for, and you got a crappy one, and now you're way out in front or way hitting a ball out of your zone. There's so many things that happen that I think we don't appreciate if you look at it just through a numbers lens.
Right. And we hear numbers, but we also don't acknowledge that, let's say exit velocity. And you're like, okay, it's important to know how hard someone hit the ball, but there's so much more to it. And it gets painted the way you say. Some guys say the numbers are obviously incomplete because Alex Bregman just hit 190 miles an hour into the stands, and Aaron Judge hit 110 and it was an out. It's like, yeah, but what was the launch angle? What was the spin? What was the and if you have a complete set of numbers, you can paint an appropriate picture. But when you throw out one number, it happens with WAR. People talk about wins above replacement, and there are flaws in that. There are two totally different systems. And so do we get rid of the numbers, or do we try to acknowledge that they're incomplete, but they're trying to aid in our understanding of the game?
Well, right. I mean, but even if number one, I think exit velocity is really important because it shows you, we all teach as a coach, do what control what you control the controllables, forget about the other stuff. If you do the things you can control more often, you're going to be successful. Exit velocity overall is a good thing. It doesn't mean that you should be arguing, my guy hit a ball 112 miles an hour, this guy hit a ball 90 and we should have won but for that. But over the long run, it matters. Over the long run, throwing a pitcher with a great ERA or whatever, it matters. It doesn't necessarily matter for that one game. A crappy pitcher could beat a good pitcher in any one game, but over the long run, it matters. So that's where the numbers come into play. That's why heat maps are so important. You could throw a ball in the blue and it could get killed, But over the long run, you know you made the right decision and it's going to have better outcomes more often than not. It doesn't mean that every outcome's positive.
Right. What are you going to do otherwise? Did you want to
And
throw a
that
red one? And why was it
quantification-
red?
Yeah,
Right.
if it was just numbers, all the stat heads would be running the game. But how do you quantify team chemistry? How do you account for someone getting jammed and hitting a 97 hopper that
Actually-
ends up being a base hit, and the guy behind him who hasn't hit a home run in 2 months gets into one? And given enough chances, I think it's Chevy Chekhov's laws of inequality. You can be consistently inconsistent and be very predictable. And that's what baseball is. The one thing you can count on, there will be a game or two, or maybe even a series, decided by something or someone that nobody would have guessed.
The chemistry thing is fascinating because there are people that believe there is zero impact to team chemistry, to continuity. But then you watch what the Braves are doing and wondering what is this going to mean when it's the same 10 or 12, whatever it is now, guys that they've signed for the next 5 to 6 years, and how does that play out? And you watch a team like, I don't want to necessarily say the Yankees don't have good chemistry, but okay, I said it. And you watch when they get behind a little bit, and some of it's the fans who either are gloating because they're winning or they're booing because they're losing. It's a weird dynamic, but it plays into the dugout too. And it's interesting what you say. And you sound like a pro chemistry guy, that you realize that it's important.
Yeah, I mean, how do you explain me pitching in the big leagues? I didn't do it on, tools, but it seemed like
you had an Emery board, right?
Well, I had ways to try to get around.
I think that's my answer. Yeah.
Okay, that would be a good answer, but you have to figure out, even if you show someone how to fiddle with the ball, you still got to be able to throw it for a strike with the bases loaded in the 9th inning.
And you had the bases loaded a lot too. That's right.
Oh yeah, and I kept a lot of guys in the big leagues, and I think one of the stats that I was most proud of until someone explained it to me, there were double plays when I pitched were more than any other pitcher on the staff. Number one, there was always somebody on first base when I was pitching, but I had a good move. And a good move means double play depth at shortstop and second base is a little further from the bag.
Right.
And that's why. So those are the kind of things that may escape, but the fact that you're out there believing that all I got to do is hit a ground ball and I'll get out of this. So let me throw some old school stuff at you. The best pitch in baseball, everybody says it's strike one. Best pitch in baseball is really an atom ball. And an atom ball, even if you hang it, if it's hit at somebody, and there's only 2 things better than a double play. You guys know what they are? What are the 2 things that are better than a double play?
A triple
Well, I
play?
can't say it. Yeah, I can't say it on the air.
A triple play is one of them. And then the other one we can't say on this venue, but
right.
All right, so we both know what that is. So a triple play.
Right.
And you're always living in those margins. And team chemistry is huge. If you talk to, like I spend, I'm very lucky to be around Nola and Ryan and listen to his wisdom. And when he was with both the Astros and the Texas Rangers in the front office, he was a believer in team chemistry. Do these guys get along? I don't care what the numbers say. Do these guys get along? And I'll guarantee you that the clubhouse with the Astros and the Phillies, there are a bunch of guys in there that would kill for each other.
Look at the Yankees. Look at the Yankees fumbling that little flip, and did it matter that you didn't know which of the 3 shortstops was there and how he took it? I don't know, maybe.
Yeah,
but it wouldn't have if you had 2 guys playing 150 games at second and short.
And also, us sitting here thinking about it and talking about it is really cool. But again, what impact do you think we're going to have on the final analysis in the World Series? Probably not a lot. I liked your idea. When you call it early, then at least you're committed to what you're calling. So I say Astros. Rob, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the Astros bandwagon for a while. I would say the Astros. I don't ever want to write off Philly for exactly the reasons I said, and I said that last round. I actually had the Padres over the Phillies too, and I said the same thing though. You can't write them off because they do at the top of their, the top of their meat of their lineup. Their top pitchers, their top bullpen pieces are as good as anybody. And depends on how much that's going to make up how they attack these guys and how you're able to navigate around that. And if anybody else steps up, so you just don't know. There could be.
Yeah.
But if I give you 4-1, but if I give you 4-1, do you take the Phillies?
Yeah, I think that's
4-1.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. 3-1, 4-1. Tom doesn't. Right?
Yeah. We haven't mentioned the manager with the Phillies. He's been a winner wherever he's gone. And he was with the Yankees and the Phillies. The Yankees didn't want to let him go, but they did. And wherever he's gone and been a bench guy, he's developed chemistry around him. So there's an X factor there also.
So isn't this the most important part, and maybe why you're seeing this in managers, is the ability to synthesize both analytics, so new school stuff, but keep the old school stuff where you understand players, you understand that they're individuals, you create a team atmosphere, and not being run solely by analytics, but having a combination. Is that what you're seeing more and more of, is kind of the secret sauce? Same thing with the Braves with Snitker. I mean, he's a baseball guy for years and years. You don't throw out the analytics, but you don't make them absolutely your, I'm gonna do this no matter what type of thing. You have to have the ability to create an atmosphere of winning. Same thing in companies like Harvard. Harvard Business School teaches why team atmosphere is important. And everybody that's worked at a company has worked with jerks that you never wanted to go to work, and if you messed up, they would snap at you, and you didn't ever feel like taking a chance. And if you did, and everything was going well, they were great. You need, why is that out the window when you're playing a sport? It should be actually more important when you're playing a sport, because the ability to fail and come back from that is huge in baseball. So why isn't team atmosphere and old school guys that understand that, but also are educated and open-minded enough to accept analytics, the most important thing? Like, that to me is the secret sauce.
Well, just have a look at the playoffs and who's going to the World Series. All the skippers of each team were more old school than new school, and all of them are very aware of the quantitative side of the equation, the data management, but they still trust their gut on certain calls, putting this guy in for defense, putting this guy under pinch hit, staying with this guy a little longer than we should because he trusts that it'll come out. So it's a combination of both. But again, that's what makes, for me, as much as I enjoy sports in general, baseball is still the game.
Fisher, how important like in heat maps, how fluid are they for a pitcher? Like you're giving some of the best guys in baseball this. Do they at some point this pitch isn't working for them, or they don't feel comfortable, right, their guts telling them something else? You're accepting of that, and you understand that in player conversations as well, right?
Right. There's so much going on short and medium term where the pitches themselves are changing and they're gaining and losing confidence. And that's a big part of this whole thing. I can just rain down maps on them, but it helps for the guys that do talk more regularly with me to understand the confidence and be like, well, your map's nice and blue, but that's based on, your track record coming in here. And you told me when you threw your bullpen, like it was gone, and I've never had that happen to me before. And oh my God, it's game 2. So now I don't know if I should throw it. I mean, those are huge factors. It's interesting. And that's where the weather came into play. I was thinking about Melvin and the whole, why didn't you bring in Josh Hader to face Harper? It's like, well, he's working back. He's like, well, I need to win the game and I need to get Harper out, but I also need to get 5 more outs. And Suarez has been out there on that filthy, sloppy mound. And at least he's throwing normally. And I don't really know if Josh Hader can come in and whip and not have an issue with that mound. And there's a lot more to it. So that was a roundabout way of answering your question, but there's so much going on. And when you're asking about analytics, The good teams are not the ones that have the most analytics. They're the ones that can shape the analytics to fit into the heads differently of
Exactly.
each player. And some
Can
guys are
you,
like, I
can you
have
say that again for whoever's watching us right now? Say that again, because that's the key to the whole deal.
right.
Analytics by themselves are great, but they're not going to win in the long run unless you put the human element on top of it.
Right. There are teams that can ask the right questions, but they don't know how to answer them. But there are also teams that ask way too many questions or answer way too many questions.
Right.
And everybody I work with, and so I'm sure that everybody in the world has a different capacity to receive and utilize information. And the teams that would be the best off, and the ones that could just, there's so much low-hanging fruit here, is to figure out how to fit that into each head. It's dramatically different. You guys would, the average fan would not have any clue of how different pitchers are. Pitcher to pitcher, catchers different, but they are different. But pitchers are so different. And there are definitely guys who are like, I only have enough brain power. I have to devote all my brain power to seeing what the catcher wants me to do and focusing on delivering a professional pitch. I don't have any room in my head to go, gee, I wonder if I should throw the changeup here, even though he's telling me the fastball. They don't have room for it. And it's stunning. It's stunning how different. And others like, I want to know as much as I can, and they shouldn't. And then there's others who want to know as much as they can, and they should, that they thrive with more, that you almost can't give them enough, which is just amazing. Those are the unicorns, but they do exist.
I've noticed that from a bunch of Astros players understand analytics a little deeper than maybe some other players from other teams. They're able to explain it and why it's important better than some other folks when I've talked to them. And I don't know if that's an organizational philosophy, if they've just been around it more, or they're just bluffing and maybe they don't understand it and they're just saying.
No, it's something that's delivered and sold from the minor leagues, low A ball, all the way to the big leagues. By the time they get to the big leagues, or if they come from another organization to the Astros, it doesn't take long for them to get assimilated into the mindset that allows them to win. And then when you have someone like Dusty that's putting the human element together right along with it, that's the winning formula.
Well, I speak from, hearing directly from the several Astros pitchers how much they respect Maldonado. And sometimes instead of trying to mesh Codify stuff with Maldonado, they're like, well, I think we'll just go with Maldonado here because it feels better.
Maldonado is the one that sees when a hitter is moving
really
up
good.
Right.
They have the roadmap, but they see how the opposing team is trying to get there a different way. Mm-hmm. So, all these teams have a catcher that can take a pitching staff. And having been a pitcher, pitchers are screwed up, and they see the world differently. But the catcher is the one that allows what the pitchers are looking at and what the manager is looking at, and kind of putting it together with a decision that will give the best chance for a result with this pitch, this moment.
Quick question. Maybe you don't have the answer to it, and then we can wrap up. Who do you view as the filthiest starting pitcher, both teams combined? Filthiest starting pitcher in the series and filthiest reliever in the series.
Your definition of filthy?
My definition of filthy.
McCullers.
That's what I would say. I agree.
Ask me a tough question.
I got to go with Wheeler because he's got 3+ pitches that he can locate. All I hope is that he's allowed to have free reign in a game where it's not weather. He'd be my pick as a starting pitcher, and then my closer. Oh boy, the one that scares me the most is that 100-mile-an-hour left-hander,
Alvarado.
The Phillies.
Yeah, I've been on him for several years, and he's finally put his command up a notch because he's always been a guy that struggled with that. And I think his ability to command his cutter is absolutely huge. And that pitch is one of the more deadlier pitches in the major leagues. As far as like swings and misses, that thing is just disgusting.
And when the Phillies sent him to AAA ball in the middle of the summer, he went down there and figured it out. So when they face that kind of adversity and they come back to the big leagues, it usually carries them for a while. So those would be my two.
So you have
What
both
do you-
Phillies in both. So Fisher, what you had McCullers as a starter.
Well, right, but I answered a different question than Tom
Right. You
did.
answered
Tom's-
my yeah, I understand. what
Right.
you're saying.
I'm not sorry, Lance, if you're watching. I'm not saying I would pick Lance over Wheeler, but for filth, for Rob's definition of filth, it's McCullers.
That's pretty good. So
But-
his dad was
but-
pretty good too.
Yeah, he was all right.
I actually coached the dad, so it's in the gene pool.
He's incredible, for sure.
And reliever, who do you got?
You gotta
Yeah,
go
I've been
with
watching-
Presley.
I mean, I have to. That's what I'm trying to do is come up
Yeah,
with someone that
he's got
isn't Presley.
Right, and that's a great answer too,
Yeah.
because he's got so many weapons and they're all
They
elite.
both have Bugs Bunny breaking balls.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
that's ends our little get together just like we started. The hardest pitch to hit in the big leagues is a breaking ball, a curveball. You know, it's always fun to hang out with you guys. I love it when you can actually talk numbers and performance and have it actually mean something. So anytime I can hang out with you guys, put me on the calendar. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, and it's good. I think we all kind of look at it basically similarly on that too.
Don't miss. I know you guys know, but this is it for the shift. So don't miss that when you're watching the World Series. This could be the last
Yeah,
time you
this
see
is it, right? Because
Mhm.
you have from here on out, it's got to be two infielders on each side.
Are we going to
Mhm.
miss that? Have we missed pitchers hitting?
I don't miss pitchers hitting, but I
No.
do miss left-handers not being able to get base hits as much as right-handers because of the shift.
Right. It was bad enough to see three guys on the dirt. That's one thing,
Yeah.
but at least something. But the 200-foot lineouts to short right, oh God, just drove me
Yeah.
crazy.
As a fan, it's tough. Like you're sitting there, you know, every time you've ever watched a game that this was a hit, and now it's at somebody that is placed
Right.
somewhere. Yeah, it's great to have that, you know, to have those analytics in the game and to see math at play in baseball. But I don't think the average fan enjoys that as much. To me,
And we'll have the pitch clock, which
That's
is
going to be a
gonna
problem.
it's gonna be a problem for some guys, big time.
I'm going to go on record right now and say that will be a huge problem all summer long next year. I hope they can iron the wrinkles out in spring training. But
I was very surprised they picked those numbers to start out. I get that you might want to end up there in a year or two, maybe, but I was surprised that those are the numbers out of the gates. 15
that's going to be the
seconds.
one that's going
Yeah.
to blow up on them. You wait and see.
Mhm.
yeah, I do think fans will enjoy maybe a quicker pace of play in the game, as long as it doesn't ruin the game. And you have things where you're getting guys put on because they weren't moving fast enough, and everybody's just be frustrated with the whole thing.
Right. But
We're going to have as much trouble with the hitters.
Well, and
their
the
time.
and inability to pick off multiple
Yeah.
times too is going to be an issue.
Oh, I know. Yeah, good for Nestor and Stroh and Darvish and guys that you only have to start your pitch. You don't have to deliver it, so they can still
Yeah.
do their thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad we solved all the problems in
Yeah.
the world.
Well, it's been great. Fisher, did you give an official prediction? Are you going Astros too? Or are you just going to be a?
Oh, straight prediction. There's no doubt. If I have to pick a team, there's no doubt it's the Astros. It's just a question of what odds you want to give.
We're 3 for 3 then, huh?
Yeah, it looks that
Yeah,
way.
they're clearly better. It doesn't
Which
mean
means
that they'll
bet on
win,
the
to our
Phillies.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw some crazy numbers, some crazy odds out there. So maybe.
Well, I'm hoping for good baseball. And thank y'all. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this, and it's been great catching up.
Good talking to you guys.
Happy Tuesday, guys.